I think what's happened to Europe is a shame. I think the immigration, allowing the immigration to take place in Europe is a shame. I think it changed the fabric of Europe. And unless you act very quickly, it's never going to be what it was. And I don't mean that in a positive way. So I think allowing millions and millions of people to come in to Europe is very, very sad. I think you're losing your culture.
That was President Trump speaking to the British newspaper The Sun about immigration in Europe this week. And those comments come as reports continue to show migrant parents struggling to reunite with their children here in the United States. I'm joined now by Democratic Representatives Karen Bass of California and Mark Vesey of Texas. Congress persons. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I do think this is a story that very much deserves our continued focus. And Congressman, I know you were just down on the border. What did you see there? What is underway? What is not underway? And did they let you see the things you came to look for?
Not all of the things that we came to look for. I visited 3 centers with Senator Gillibrand out of New York. We started off in McAllen and then ventured to Brownsville and then went to Karnes County, which is a detention center that's just outside of San Antonio. And there were lots of problems. You can tell that the Trump administration was just woefully unprepared to deal with separating so many children from their families. And I thought the most troubling thing that we saw, particularly at the detention center in McAllen, was that you had a young girl that was 2 years old, that they wouldn't let her near her father. And it was just absolutely awful. At one of the HHS facilities that we visited in Brownsville, you have 8 boys for every caseworker there. And so when we were there were 1,400 boys that were there. This is a center for 10 to 17-year-old boys. And they're trying to reunite them, but they're only reuniting 150 to 125 to 150 a week. And you just, when you leave, you tell yourself there's no way they're ever going to be able to reunify all of these children with their families. And that's really the sad part.
And it's pretty clear that our government was not. I mean, the fact that we have actually misplaced, in some cases, the children from their parents, that we don't know where the parents and children are to be even able to reunify them.
You know, one of the issues I work on in Congress is child welfare, improving our foster care system. And so to me, I look at this a little different because this is really our government inflicting child abuse. The idea that you would separate parents from children, and I'm convinced that of the 2,000 children, I think few of them will be reunited. Because just imagine, and these cases have already happened, where a parent is deported, how are they supposed to find their child again? So there was one case that I heard about where the mother actually knew where her child was. She called up and she was told, if you want your child back, you have to pay $1,500. $1,500 for your child to be transported and for there to be a chaperone. Another woman who didn't speak English or Spanish, she spoke a Mayan dialect, and she couldn't even make the phone calls. Parents are being charged for the phone calls. I believe that a lot of these children will wind up in the foster care system that is already overburdened because of the opioid crisis. And then, you know, you can only stay in foster care for so long before parental rights are terminated and you're put up for adoption. This is just egregious.
Yeah. I want to get you guys to both respond to also what we played of the president there at the top of the show, essentially saying that he thinks what's happening in Europe means that European countries are losing their cultures. And Congresswoman, I'll start with you. What do you think he's really saying?
Oh, he's talking about race. I think he's absolutely talking about race. He's essentially saying, as he has said here, you know, if you're coming from Norway, it's fine. But if you're coming from other countries, I have a problem with that. I think that's absolutely what he's signaling. And I think it's about race and I think it's about religion, because he's also talking about the fact that a large number of people are of the Muslim faith.
You agree, Congressman?
Oh, totally. And if you think about Stephen Miller, who is his top immigration strategist in the White House, this is a guy that grew up and when he went to high school told one of his best friends that had gone to his bar mitzvah that he was no longer going to be his friend anymore because he was Latino. And this guy is absolutely warped. He is the one that said that he was actually happy to see children being separated from their families. He told other people in the White House this, and as long as he's being advised by someone like that, immigration coming out of this White House is going to be a problem. It doesn't matter what you do.
You know, children who, in our country, who should be removed from their parents because of child abuse or child neglect are completely traumatized, even when the parent is not appropriate. And they will talk years later and they will say, you knew my mother had a mental health problem or an addiction problem. Why didn't you help her? Why did you separate me from her? So now you're talking about children who are being separated for political reasons,
from loving
the damage
Yep.
that is being inflicted on them. And now we've even taken it so far that we're making judgments as to whether or not they should be reunited. Have you heard that? That some of the children, they're saying, well, we shouldn't reunite them.
Well, in the
because they
case
might
of
be
if
criminal.
they think there is an abusive parent or if it's a smuggler, yes, right.
Right.
But at the same
If it's
time,
a
that is catching up with some people who are here legitimately. While I have you both, I do want to talk politics ever so briefly.
Sure.
As you know, we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Congressman Joe Crowley, a key ally of Nancy Pelosi's, was defeated in his primary. So my question for both of you is, and Congresswoman, I'm interested, we can start with you. Do you think that whoever is the Democratic leader come next year, whether that be the Speaker of the House or still the Democratic leader, should there be changes to the seniority rules in the Democratic caucus to try and make way for newer generational leadership? Republicans have this. They put limits on their chairman and other things.
Right. Well, it is a good question to ask me because I actually chaired the Democratic Caucus Rules Committee. And the irony is that the seniority is not absolute. And so anybody can challenge a person in a position. And that has happened occasionally. So although seniority is a tradition.
Should there be seniority limits?
I think that the limit should be if a person no longer is able or whatever and they're challenged, then I think that's right. I think if you have a mechanical limit, I think that's problematic, and I think that's manifested in the Republican caucus because they have a dog-eat-dog environment every few years because they know those chairmanships are going to turn over.
Sure. They still have a lot, their leadership's a lot younger. Congressman, do you have a different take on this?
No. I mean, my take is essentially the same as Karen's, but I will tell you that we need to make sure as Democrats that we get the 23 seats that we need to be in the majority, and there's been a lot of talk and speculation about who's going to be what and how all these things are going to take shape. And I will tell you that after each election, the Democratic caucus, we get together, we choose our leaders, we choose who's going to be on steering and policy, who's going to be on what committees. But until then, we need to be focused on making sure that we get those 23 seats, because guess what? We won't have anything to fight over if we don't get to that magic number.
I certainly agree with him. And I also come from a state, California, where we had very strict term limits. You could only serve in the House for 6 years. And I can tell you the chaos that ensued.
Right.
Finally, the voters went to the ballot and changed it. Now
all of
it's
it.
extended a little bit more.
Right, indeed. Congresswoman Karen Bass, Congressman Mark Vesey, thank you both very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.